I still remember the day I met Lucas Whitmore like it was yesterday. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in Boston. The kind of day when golden leaves swirl through the air like something out of a movie. I had just moved to the city, fresh out of college, chasing my dreams of becoming an interior designer. I didn't know a soul. I had nothing but a small apartment, a second-hand sofa, and a heart full of ambition. I was sitting in a quiet cafe on the Maple and Vine Cafe, sketching in my notebook and sipping overpriced tea, when he walked in. He had this casual elegance about him. Dark wool coat, leather gloves, and a quiet confidence that didn't try too hard. His eyes were the first thing I noticed. Bright blue, with this curious sparkle, like he saw something in me no one else had. We struck up a conversation over coffee. No cheesy lines, no forced charm. Just easy, honest conversation. He laughed at my jokes. He listened like he meant it. And when he asked if he could see me again, I didn't hesitate. Looking back now, I had no idea how that one cup of coffee would change my entire life. We fell in love the way people do in stories. Fast, fearlessly, with no thought of what could go wrong. He wasn't like any man I'd ever met, and definitely not like the wealthy men you hear about in tabloids. Lucas never showed off his money. He didn't wear flashy suits or talk about power. If anything, he was humble, almost quiet about his background. It wasn't until our fourth date that I even found out his last name meant something. Montgomery. As in Whitmore Capital Group, one of the largest luxury real estate empires in the country. They owned high-rises in Manhattan, estates in Evelyn Garden, penthouses with sweeping views of Evelyn Garden. The kind of wealth most people only read about. And yet, Lucas never acted like he was better than anyone. He never treated me like I was temporary. If anything, he made me feel like I was the center of his world. Those first few months with him were a dream. We'd take walks through Evelyn Garden, share street food under city lights, lie on the couch watching movies while I showed him Pinterest boards full of design ideas. He told me he loved the way my mind worked. That no one had ever made him laugh the way I did. I believed him. How could I not? So when I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified, but also hopeful. I sat him down in our apartment one night, my hands shaking. Before I could even finish the sentence, he was already pulling me into his arms, tears in his eyes. "We're going to be a family," he whispered. "I'll protect you. I'll protect them. You have nothing to worry about." And for a while, I believed him. It's funny, isn't it? How love can feel like enough, until it's not. Until reality crashes in with all its expectations, and suddenly promises don't hold the same weight. But in that moment, with Lucas's arms wrapped around me and his voice trembling with emotion, I truly thought we were untouchable. People say you should trust your gut, that little voice inside you that knows when something's too good to be true. But when your heart's all in, it's easy to ignore the whispers. I didn't ask about his family. I didn't wonder how they'd react. I just assumed love would be enough. Because he said it was. And when a man like Lucas Whitmore says he'll stand by you, you want to believe he means it. But what I didn't realize at the time, what I couldn't have known, was that I wasn't just falling in love with a man. I was stepping into a legacy. One where power, image, and bloodlines mattered more than love ever could. And I was about to learn that the hard way. It all started with an invitation I never wanted. Just a week after Lucas and I found out I was pregnant, his mother, Catherine Langford, sent a formal note, inviting us to a small gathering at the Whitmore estate. Of course, her version of small meant a catered black tie event with champagne fountains and a string quartet playing in the marble foyer. I remember standing outside their mansion that night, my hands trembling slightly as I fixed my dress. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself to smile, to be gracious, to make a good impression, for Lucas's sake. But deep down I knew. I knew I was stepping into a world that had already made up its mind about me. The moment I walked in, I felt it. The weight of stares. The whispered glances. Women in designer gowns who looked me up and down like I'd wandered in from the wrong side of town. Men in tailored suits who barely acknowledged my presence. The room radiated wealth, power, and quiet judgment. And then I saw her. Catherine Langford. She was seated near the fireplace, a glass of deep red wine in hand, wearing an expression so perfectly composed it almost looked robotic. Her silver hair was pulled back in a flawless chignon, and her sharp gray eyes swept across the room like a scanner. When she saw me, she smiled, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile that says, "You're being watched." "Lucas tells me you're pregnant," she said as I approached, her voice smooth but icy. "How?" "Unexpected." I managed a polite smile, but I could feel the tension in Lucas's hand as he squeezed mine. He tried to keep the conversation light, but I could see the flicker of worry in his eyes. It wasn't just me who felt the chill. He did too. But neither of us dared say it aloud. She didn't insult me. Not directly. She didn't raise her voice, or question my worth outright. No, Catherine Langford was far more sophisticated than that. She wielded her disapproval like a scalpel. Silent, precise, and just sharp enough to make you bleed without ever leaving a visible wound. That night, I left the estate feeling like a stranger in my own life. And that's when things started to change. Lucas began to pull away. Slowly at first. Missed calls, vague excuses, moments of silence that used to be filled with laughter. Then came the late-night phone calls with his mother. The long pauses. The empty reassurances. Every time I asked what was wrong, he'd say, "It's nothing. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. And we both knew it. By the time I gave birth to our twins, I felt like I was sharing my life with a ghost. Lucas was there physically. He held the babies, smiled for pictures, but emotionally, he was miles away. There was a wall between us, invisible but solid, and no matter how hard I tried to reach through it, he only drifted further. And then came the morning that shattered everything. I was rocking our newborns in our small apartment, humming softly as sunlight spilled across the floor. Lucas came in, and for a brief second, I thought, maybe he's here to make things right. Maybe he's remembered who we are. What we have. What we promised. But then I saw his face. His eyes were hollow. His shoulders tense. Something inside me already knew what he was about to say, even before he opened his mouth. "We need to talk," he whispered. I placed the babies gently in their crib, my heart pounding. "What is it, Lucas?" He couldn't look at me. He swallowed hard and said the words I never thought I'd hear. "I can't do this anymore." I froze. "Can't do what?" He hesitated. Then, "I have to leave." "Leave." The word echoed through the room like a gunshot. "You're leaving," I whispered, barely able to breathe. "You're leaving us? Your own children." "My mother was right," he said quietly, eyes still avoiding mine. "We don't belong in the same world." In that moment, I realized the truth. It wasn't just his decision. It was hers. Catherine hadn't just disapproved of me. She had poisoned everything we had built. She had whispered doubt into his ear until love wasn't enough. Until promises no longer meant anything. Lucas didn't fight for us. He folded. He turned his back, walked toward the door, and didn't even look back. Just a quiet, "I'm sorry," before the door slammed shut. And just like that, I was alone, with 2 newborns, a shattered heart, and the bitter truth that sometimes, the people who promise to love you the most are the first to abandon you when it's inconvenient. After Lucas walked out, time became a blur. There were no dramatic screams, no slamming of doors after that one final one. Just silence. Deafening. Bone-deep silence. I remember sitting there on the floor, still holding the baby blanket I had just folded, staring at the crib where my twins were sleeping. I couldn't move. My mind kept replaying that last conversation like a broken record. We don't belong in the same world. As if love and family were optional. As if leaving your children behind was something a man could reason his way through. It's strange what your body remembers in times like that. The ache in my back from labor that hadn't fully healed. The sting in my chest every time I tried to breathe. The way my fingers trembled when I reached for the baby bottles but forgot why I picked them up in the first place. People talk about postpartum like it's just hormones or mood swings. But what they don't talk about is what happens when you're completely alone. When you're recovering from childbirth with no partner, no support, and 2 fragile little souls relying on you just to make it through the night. That's not sadness. That's survival. The nights were the hardest. When the lights went off and the babies cried in turns. When their soft gasping wails filled the small apartment and echoed against bare walls. I held them against my chest, whispered lullabies with a voice so hoarse I barely recognized it as mine. I told them it was going to be okay, even when I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. I didn't shower unless it was absolutely necessary. My body was running on nothing but instinct. I changed diapers half asleep, heated bottles with shaking hands, and counted every diaper in the pack like I was rationing for war. And I didn't tell anyone. My phone rang dozens of times. Friends from college. Former co-workers. Even a couple of distant family members. But I didn't answer. I didn't want to explain. What would I say? The man who promised me forever just walked out 2 days after our children were born. And now, I'm alone, bleeding emotionally and physically, with no one to lean on except 2 infants who can't even lift their heads. Yeah, that didn't sound like small talk. So, I shut the world out. I pulled the curtains closed and created a fortress of silence around myself and my babies. I told myself it was safer that way, that if I didn't let anyone in, they couldn't remind me of everything I had lost. But one night, something shifted. It was raining. One of those slow, steady drizzles that sounds like a clock ticking on the windowpane. I was sitting by the crib, watching my babies sleep. Their tiny chests rose and fell in perfect rhythm. Their fingers curled around each other like they were already holding on for dear life. And I realized, they didn't know they'd been abandoned. They didn't feel that their father was gone. They still believed the world was safe and warm, because I had made it that way. And that's when it hit me. I couldn't afford to fall apart anymore. These 2 little people didn't just need a mother. They needed a warrior. Someone who would rise from the ashes of heartbreak, who would fight for their future even when the world turned its back. And that warrior had to be me. It wasn't instant. Healing never is. But the next morning, I opened the window. I let the air back in. I picked up the phone, not to call anyone, but to start searching for work. I had no childcare, no job, no money. But I had purpose. And for the first time since Lucas left, I had clarity. Getting back up wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. After weeks of surviving on fumes, something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way my daughter started holding onto my finger just a little tighter. Maybe it was the way my son's eyes followed me around the room, already searching for comfort. Whatever it was, it made one thing clear. I didn't have the luxury of falling apart anymore. My grief wasn't a private affair. It had 2 witnesses who needed me whole. So I did what most single mothers in my situation do. I got to work. I pulled out my old laptop, still half covered in stickers from college. It was slow and cracked in one corner, but it booted up. That was enough. I updated my resume, polished my portfolio, dug up every contact I could think of from my brief time at the design firm in Manhattan. Then I started applying. Job after job after job. But the rejections came just as fast. Some companies were blunt. "We're looking for someone with more flexibility," they'd say. And you knew exactly what that meant. "We don't want a mother who might need to leave early for a sick baby or a school pickup." Others were more polite, throwing around words like competitive candidate pool and culture fit. But the message was always the same. You're too complicated, too risky, too tied down. I lost count after the first dozen rejections. Every email that started with, "Thank you for your interest," felt like another door slamming in my face. I remember one afternoon, sitting on the floor with both babies asleep beside me, just staring at my inbox in tears. I hadn't eaten all day. My fridge held little more than half a carton of eggs and some formula. I felt invisible. Like the world had decided I no longer counted. But I kept going. I had to. I cut out every expense that wasn't essential. No more streaming services. No takeout. No new clothes. Not even for the babies, unless they absolutely needed it. I learned how to stretch a grocery run with precision. Oatmeal became dinner. Coupons became currency. I also learned to multitask like a pro. I'd rock one twin with my foot while typing cover letters with one hand. I could hold a bottle, wipe a tear, and reply to emails, all before 9 a.m. My life became a carefully choreographed dance of survival and determination. And then, after what felt like an eternity, a reply came in that wasn't a rejection. A small interior design company, one I'd reached out to weeks ago, said they needed help with a remote project. A simple freelance assignment. Modest pay. No benefits. But it was something. It was mine. I cried harder than I had the day Lucas left. Not because the job would fix everything. It wouldn't. But because it meant I still had value. That somewhere out there, someone believed I could contribute. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely invisible. I worked late into the night on that first project. The baby's asleep beside me, the glow of my laptop screen casting soft light across the room. I poured everything I had into that job. Every bit of creativity. Every ounce of discipline. I wanted them to know they hadn't made a mistake choosing me. And when they asked me to take on another one the following week, I knew. This was the first brick in the new foundation I would build. The idea didn't come to me in some lightning flash of genius. It came one quiet afternoon, as I was folding tiny onesies on the couch while my twins napped nearby. I remember holding up a newborn outfit, basic, stiff, and honestly kind of ugly, and thinking, why is it so hard to find something soft, affordable, and actually cute for babies? That's when it hit me. The baby clothes I could afford looked cheap and felt worse. The ones I wanted, the organic cotton, minimalist designs, neutral tones, were ridiculously expensive. And as a mom doing everything on her own, I couldn't justify spending $38 on a single baby romper. But my baby still deserved to wear something beautiful. Something made with love. So, I decided I'd make it myself. I remembered how my mom used to teach me to sew when I was little. She didn't have much, but she had a machine and a knack for making something out of nothing. She's not around anymore, but those skills, the muscle memory of stitching, folding fabric, following patterns, they were still somewhere in me, just waiting to wake up. I borrowed an old sewing machine from my downstairs neighbor. It was loud, temperamental, and jammed every 10 minutes. But it worked. And that night, after Luna and Leo fell asleep, I sat at my tiny kitchen table and sewed my first handmade baby onesie. It wasn't perfect. The seams were a little crooked, the neckline a bit uneven. But it was soft, stretchy, cozy. And it made my daughter look like a tiny angel when I dressed her in it the next morning. I didn't expect what came next. I took a quick photo, just for fun, and posted it on my old social media account. I hadn't been active in months, but that one photo, it sparked something. A friend from college messaged me, asking where I got the outfit. Then another one. Did you make that? They asked. Would you ever sell one? At first, I laughed it off. Me? Sell baby clothes? I was barely keeping my head above water. But something inside me whispered, what if you could? What if this is your way forward? I didn't have money to launch a business. No fancy marketing. No team. Just scraps of fabric, late nights, and a head full of ideas. But I did have purpose, and when you have that, it's amazing what you can do with so little. I called my little venture Luna and Ivy. Because that's what my children were, and what this opportunity felt like. I created a simple logo on a free design app, opened a basic online shop, and listed a few handmade pieces. A onesie, some leggings, a soft baby dress in muted colors. Every photo was taken with my phone by the window, using a throw blanket as the background. And then, I waited. Days passed. No orders. No clicks. Just crickets. Doubt crept in. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe it was foolish to try building something from scratch when I could barely afford groceries. But then, one night, I got a notification. Order received. Some mom across the country, had bought one of my outfits. My hands were shaking as I read the message. Not because of the money, though it helped, but because of what it meant. Someone believed in what I made. In me. Turning passion into profit sounds simple on paper. But in reality, it's a different story. It's a marathon of setbacks, self-doubt, and sheer determination. After I launched Luna and Ivy, I expected orders to roll in. Maybe not thousands, but enough to feel like I was on the right track. But that didn't happen. For weeks, I refreshed my inbox, hoping to see that little notification that someone had placed an order. Most days, all I got were silence and spam emails from ad companies trying to sell me instant growth. But the truth is, nothing about growth is instant. Especially when you're building something from nothing. I took a step back and looked at my shop with honest eyes. My photos were poorly lit. My product descriptions were basic. I was still sewing in my pajamas and snapping pictures by the kitchen window. And while the pieces were made with love, love doesn't always translate through a blurry photo. So I got to work. I borrowed a friend's DSLR camera. Rearranged the furniture to create a simple home studio. I started taking photos in natural light, on clean backgrounds, with my babies as tiny, adorable models. I even learned a bit of photo editing. Nothing fancy, just enough to brighten the colors and sharpen the details. Suddenly, the products looked like something you'd want to buy, not something made in a cramped apartment at 2 a.m. Then I built a blog. Not a sleazy pitch every product kind of blog, but a space to share my story. I wrote about being a single mom, about launching a business with no budget, about what it felt like to start over while still healing. I shared photos of my twins and the clothes I made and opened up about the nights I cried into my sewing machine, wondering if any of it was worth it. And slowly, people started to find me. I joined online parenting communities. Not to sell, but to connect. I commented on posts, offered support, answered questions. I became a familiar name in Facebook mom groups and on Instagram parenting threads. And when the time felt right, I began gently mentioning Luna and Ivy. Not as a business pitch, but as something that came from love. And then, it started. A few moms placed small orders. A baby beanie here. A onesie there. Some leggings. They messaged me afterwards saying how soft the fabric felt. How their babies didn't fuss as much in my clothes. Some even sent pictures. Tiny feet poking out of my handmade pants. Sleepy eyes tucked into cotton wraps I stitched by hand. Those photos? They kept me going. They reminded me that this wasn't just about income. It was about impact. But the real turning point came in the most unexpected way. One afternoon, I noticed a spike in traffic to my site. I hadn't posted anything new. I hadn't run any ads. Then my phone buzzed, again and again and again. Orders. Messages. Comments. I couldn't keep up. Turns out, a popular mom influencer had shared my brand on her Instagram story. She had ordered one of my newborn outfits weeks ago, quietly, without telling me who she was, and when she received it, she fell in love. Her post said something like, "This small shop made me cry." The quality. The story. The heart behind every stitch. Please support Celeste at Luna and Ivy. That one mention changed everything. Within 24 hours, my inbox was flooded. I had more orders than I could possibly handle alone. I called my friend to help me package them. We were wrapping baby clothes in tissue paper on my living room floor until 3 a.m., laughing through exhaustion, trying not to mess up shipping labels. I knew I had to scale. Fast. I reached out to a small local sewing workshop, run by a group of women who'd recently been laid off from a larger factory. I shared my story, showed them the designs, and asked if they'd be willing to help. They said yes. And just like that, I wasn't a one-woman operation anymore. Luna and Ivy was growing. I used to dream of simple things, like opening the fridge and knowing there'd be enough food for the week. Like paying the rent without having to count quarters. Like sleeping through the night without worrying how I'd make it to the next month. So when Luna and Ivy finally took off, it didn't feel real. Not at first. At first, it was a steady trickle of orders. Then it became a flood. And somewhere along the way, something shifted. My brand wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It had become a recognized name in the children's fashion world. Bloggers were writing about it. Parenting sites were tagging it. I even got an email from a well-known retail editor asking if I'd be open to doing an interview. An interview. I had to read that email 3 times just to believe it. Me, Celeste, the girl who once Googled how to hand sew baby leggings, was now being asked for business advice. I still remember the day everything changed again. I was in the middle of packing a batch of orders, my twins playing nearby with fabric scraps, when I got the email that made me drop my phone. A major Eden Mother collective, one of the biggest mother and baby lifestyle stores in Boston, wanted to collaborate. They had seen my work through a feature in a Mom & Company magazine and were impressed not only by the designs but by the story behind the brand. They didn't just want to stock my pieces, they wanted to bring Luna and Ivy into their flagship stores across the country. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. Then I cried. Not because I made it, but because I remembered the nights I almost gave up. The nights when I sewed until my fingers cramped. When I had to choose between buying thread or diapers. When I sent out sample packages and no one ever responded. And now, I was being seen. Not pitied. Not dismissed. Seen. That offer gave me enough security to finally take the leap I'd dreamed of for so long. I moved out of the cramped one-bedroom apartment that still carried echoes of heartbreak. I found a cozy light-filled house just outside the city. Nothing extravagant, But it had a little backyard, room for my kids to run, and space for a proper office. And most importantly, peace. No more fear. No more scarcity. No more calculating every penny. I could finally breathe. I could finally say yes to my kids without silently calculating if it would mean saying no to dinner. And the best part? I wasn't hustling just to survive anymore. I was building, creating, growing something meaningful. Something that belonged to me, and only me. There's something deeply powerful about reclaiming your life after someone tried to write you out of your own story. I wasn't just the woman who'd been left. I wasn't just the single mom scraping by. I was now an entrepreneur, a provider, a creator, and I had done it all with 2 babies on my hip and no roadmap. It had been years. Years since that door slammed shut behind him. Years since I watched the man I loved walk away from me, and from the 2 tiny humans we had just brought into the world. I had buried that moment like a stone in the deepest part of me. Not because I wanted to forget it, but because I refused to let it define me. And then, one quiet Sunday afternoon, it all came rushing back, with one message. Celeste. It's Lucas. Can we talk? It was so simple. So casual. As if he were texting a friend he hadn't seen in a while. As if the weight of abandonment, silence, and betrayal could be undone with 7 words on a screen. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry but because I felt nothing. That was the moment I realized how far I'd come. He no longer held space in my heart. The wound had closed. The scar remained, yes, but it no longer burned. A few days later, I took the kids to the park. It was warm out. They were chasing each other through the grass, giggling, carefree. I sat on a bench, sipping my coffee, watching the life I had built unfold in front of me. That's when I saw him. Lucas. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, eyes locked on me. Not the way lovers look at each other, but the way a man stares at something he used to own but lost. He looked older. Tired. A shadow of the man I once knew. And when he stepped forward, I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I simply waited. I wasn't sure you'd even want to see me, he said. I gave a quiet nod. Then why are you here? He glanced toward the kids, then back at me. I saw you in the news. The brand you built. Everything you've done. I realized I was wrong. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I came to say I'm sorry. Not because I expect forgiveness. Not because I want anything. I just needed to say it. There was a time, years ago, when those words would have shattered me. When I would have clung to them like oxygen. But not today. Today they felt small. I appreciate that, I said simply. But you should know, your apology doesn't change anything. He looked surprised. Like he thought remorse could somehow unlock the door he slammed shut years ago. I'm not angry anymore, Lucas, I continued. But I'm not the woman you left. I'm stronger now. I found peace, and I found it without you. He lowered his head. I know. I regret everything. I gave a soft smile. Not out of affection, but out of closure. We all live with the consequences of our choices. Yours gave me the hardest years of my life. But they also gave me purpose. So in some strange way, I thank you. He looked like he wanted to say more. But I stood up, brushing off my coat. My kids were calling to me from across the field. I have to go, I said, turning toward them. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to.